Welcome back to another episode. Today I'll show you how an unplayable commander can win in bracket 4, sometimes as early as turn 3. Torsten, founder of Benalia, is currently ranked 1651 on EDHREC with just 461 decks to his name. He has no spotlight, no meta recognition, and no respect. Bracket 4 isn't about popularity. It rewards synergy, consistency, and optimization. Today, we are debunking the myth that Bracket 4 is all about top tier commanders. This is the Commander Experience. Before we get into the build, I want to take a minute to talk about the commander and why I chose him. To me, Torsten has always felt like a budget Atraxa. Both are 7 mana commanders with powerful ETB triggers, and both reward going wide with card types, or in Torsten's case, creatures and lands. Atraxa is ranked 49 on EDHREC with over 14,000 decks. Torsten? He barely shows up by comparison. Sure, Torsten is green-white, not 4 colors, but I would argue that the value from his enters the battlefield trigger is more reliable, easier to build around, and comes with something Atraxa doesn't. A death trigger that leaves behind 7 tokens. Still, I struggled to find a direction for him. I built, rebuilt, and eventually shelved the idea. Until about 3 years later, when I stumbled across a card that completely reframed the strategy. Suddenly, everything clicked. Torsten had found his home. So, what was this card that brought it all together? The card was Hare Apparent. At first glance, it's not a card most people give a second thought. But the moment I read it, something clicked. I'm running 28 copies in this deck. That kind of density gives it an identity most commander builds don't have. True consistency in a singleton format. Every Hare you draw pushes the game plan forward. It's a snowball engine that turns cheap spells into token explosions, mana, and eventually game-ending combos. You won't find this strategy on EDHREC. There are no pre-built tags or filters for this. I found only 2 other decks trying something similar. And that's the point. This isn't about following a tier list. This is about brewing with intent. When you know what your deck needs to do, you don't need meta validation to make it dangerous. With Hare Apparent as the engine, the next question is obvious. How is the deck actually winning? The core plan is to generate an overwhelming number of rabbit tokens and turn them into either infinite mana, an instant board win, or both. The main enablers are Earthcraft, Phyrexian Altar, Food Chain, and Halo Fountain. With just 1 or 2 of these in play and a Hare Apparent or 2, the board can spiral out of control quickly. Earthcraft lets token untap lands. Phyrexian Altar turns them into mana without breaking your loops, and in most cases, it's the better piece. Food Chain is in the deck too, but mostly as backup, and yes, I get it. Using Food Chain as a combo piece is not really original. But here's the thing. My original list didn't even run it. The plan was much simpler in the beginning. Tap out my creatures with Earthcraft, then untap them all with Halo Fountain and go for the win that way. The problem with Food Chain is that it exiles Torsten, which means you lose his death triggers, and that 7 tokens I'm not willing to throw away unless I have to. I only added it later on, mainly as a safety valve if Phyrexian Altar ever got removed. That said, it's also the only card that gives me a realistic path to a turn 3 win. So while it's not the default plan, it definitely adds explosiveness to the deck. Gaia's Cradle, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and 3-3 City also plays a big role here. They scale right along with your board. Even without combos, they let you explode into massive follow-up plays or power out a second wave. I run crop rotation in the list to increase the odds of seeing one when I need it, and when you do, these lands often act like a combo piece in their own right. In the right setup, a single Hare Apparent can lead to a loop. Cast, make tokens, generate mana, cast again, until you flooded the board, drawn your deck, or just straight up won. Concordant Crossroad gives everything haste, so if you got enough rabbits, you don't even need the combo, you just swing. And when the plan doesn't go off right away, that's where the real strength of the deck shows up, in how quickly it refills the hand, rebuilds the board, and finds the next angle. Let's talk about how the list keeps momentum going, and why Torsten is more than just a name on the card. One of the biggest challenges in a token deck is staying fueled, and this one doesn't just keep up, it reloads hard. Skullclamp is an all-star in token decks, and this is no exception. Card draw becomes almost effortless with all the rabbits running around. Rite of Harmony is by far the best card drawing spell in the deck. Cast it right before dropping a few hares and you draw 10, 20 cards or more in a single turn. In many cases, it draws your entire deck. It's one of the most effective ways to find your win pieces. And then there's Torsten himself. His ETB draws you a fresh grip of creatures and lands, and most importantly, more rabbits. That's what keeps the engines turning. You draw, cast, refill the board, then sack Torsten, make more tokens, and do it again. When he dies, he leaves behind 7 1/1 tokens, perfect for Earthcraft, Friction, Altar, or just rebuilding the board. But the ceiling is even higher with Luminous Broodmoth on the battlefield. With any sack outlet in play, Broodmoth gives you a second ETB on Torsten and on every single Hare Apparent. You get the draw, the tokens, and then you do it all over again and they come back with flying. It turns your mid-game value into an unsurmountable board state. And don't forget, those tokens are also your Halo Fountain win. Just having Torsten enter, die, and resolve both triggers put you more than halfway there. He's not just your commander, he's the refill, the ramp, and the setup. And with Broodmoth, it's all amplified. All of that value means the deck doesn't have to slow down, even after wipes or setbacks. But this engine comes at a cost. To make this list work the way I wanted it to, I had to let go of some expectations, including some of the so-called essentials of Commander deck building. This is a try and win first deck, which also makes it a glass cannon. That means I've made some deliberate sacrifices, starting with ramp, removal, and most forms of interaction. I do still run exploration, since Torsten often dumps a handful of lands into my hand, and it's one of the few ramp pieces that actually fits the deck's timing. I also include as much fast mana as I can, things like Chrome Mox, Lotus Petal, and Elvish Spirit Guide, just to increase the chances of casting a Hare Apparent on turn 1. And when the piggy bank is big enough, I'd like to include Mox Diamond as well. It's one of the best fits for a deck like this. But beyond that, I'm not spending mana ramping into nothing, I'm spending it to win. That said, this isn't my usual approach. I generally believe that Magic is about interacting with your opponents, and most of my decks reflects that. This one doesn't. I do run a few answers to remove the most important roadblocks, but that's it. Playing a solitaire style deck like this means accepting that sometimes you'll do nothing. The deck will spin its wheels, and you feel underwhelming. But that's the trade-off with a glass cannon build. When it works, it really works, and when it doesn't line up, you feel it. So before I committed to the list, I had to ask myself, am I okay with that? And for me, since I already had plenty of decks that do the opposite, the answer was yes. I built this deck doing one thing well, and that meant cutting anything that didn't directly serve the plan. It might not look like your typical commander deck, but in bracket 4, efficiency beats balance more often than people think. So yes, this build breaks a lot of so-called rules of commander deck construction, but that is exactly the point. To close things out, here's what the list says about how power actually works in bracket 4. So let's go back to the question we started with. Do we need a top tier commander to compete in bracket 4? I think the deck answers that pretty clearly. No, you don't. Torsten isn't popular. He's not flashy. He's not even on most people's radar. But this version of him, it can win as early as turn 3. With a focused plan, consistent support, and real synergy, Torsten becomes more than viable. He becomes dangerous. This isn't about being clever for the sake of it. It's about recognizing that power doesn't always come from popularity, and that rogue builds, when tuned well, can stand shoulder to shoulder with most recognizable names in the format. You still need a plan, you still need discipline in the build, but bracket 4 isn't a popularity contest. It rewards optimization, consistency, and intent, and if you bring those things to the table, you don't need a meta commander to earn your seat. This list has changed a lot since I first tried building around Torsten, and I'm sure it'll keep changing, because I'm a firm believer that the deck is never finished, and neither is the experience.